Hello world of YouTube and welcome to part 2 of my N9ne Discography review. This is 2008 through 2011. If you missed part 1, 1999 through 2007, click the door fedora. In that part, I cover the albums Calm Before the Storm, The Worst, Angelic, Celsius, Absolute Power, Ever Ready, and Misery Loves Company. Got it! In this part I'm going to be talking about the albums Killer, Psychology 101, KOD, The Gates Mixplate, all 6s and 7s, Welcome to Strangeland, his EP Seepage and the Lost Scripts of Kod, and his mixtape, Bad Season. It's 9 albums. That's a lot of shit. I don't want to go too much farther in this intro. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first album he released, in this part that I'm going to talk about, was called Killer, which released back in 2008. And this is a 2-disc juggernaut of a release. You have anything Tech stylistically does. You have the hype tracks, like Get the Fuck Out of Here. You have these really dark tracks, like Happy Ending and Paint a Dark Picture and Psycho Bitch 2. And you have these really big tracks that kind of sound mainstream sounding, like Yeah and Let's Go and Beat You Up, kind of. I mean, you have these big ass tracks. You have big ass features like Ice Cube and Paul Wall. You have some rock tinge tracks. You have some just gothic tracks. This really kind of introduces Tech's gothic style, especially on tracks like Paint a Dark Picture and Psycho Bitch Part 2. It feels more brooding and more just darker, like in terms of lyrical content. This is probably the most ambitious album he's done, because he wanted to compile all of these tracks. It's like 2 big Tech albums together, put out in just a year after Misery Loves Company. I mean, he fucking just... He put out... And none of the tracks on here are bad. Like, it's a great variety. It's paced well. It's kind of separated in terms of, like, where the style of tracks are. It kind of opens with this concept of therapist appointment, but it doesn't really keep with that theme. It's just kind of in the intro and the outro. It's really fucking huge. This album really should have been more popular than it was. Tech's going on. His features are killing it on here too. Like, the best I like out of the Snug Brim stuff, Chris is not his best. I still think Misery is the best he sounded, but he still sounds pretty fucking solid on here. At least in terms of verses. His choruses, anytime Chris is on a chorus of Tech, it's pretty solid. Really the only thing I'd want to take out of here are a lot of the skits, because there's a lot of skits on here, and Tech has a lot of skits on his albums, usually, but it just kind of felt excessive to a point on here. That doesn't draw away from the grand nature of this album. I definitely recommend picking this up third, maybe. If you only picked up Ever Ready and Absolute Power, pick this up third, just because it's a great cornucopia of music. Tech kills it, everything kills it, it's a great release. Yeah, he gets more and more personal, again, as I stated before, he's giving you more into his world, especially in Happy Ending. And that's a really dark track, and he really lets you in his world even more so on that track, and that's my favorite track on the album, Happy Ending, so that'll be linked in the end thingy. Let's move on, shall we? And the next album he released is called Psychology 101, which was released back in 2009, and this is another collaborative release, my favorite collaborative release, because the features kill. Chino XL and Crooked Eye on the opening track, fucking stomp. You have fucking the second favorite Midwest Choppers track with Crazy Bone and who else is on here? KD, and I think is the other one. Yeah, it's KD and Crazy Bone. They spit fury. You have Tech just going on. You have some of the rock tinge stuff that he starts to get into, like on Far Away and on Dysfunctional. You have the dark stuff that's also self-reflective, like Red Nose, probably one of his best self-reflective tracks. You have a good club hit and Pomi Another, talking about just getting drunk. You have just a great set of... It also introduced his club rap group, the 816 Boys, with Areola, song about titties. Who doesn't love a song about titties? And what I love about this collabos is that it feels more focused than the first one. The first one I feel was kind of a test. This is more of a refined one, and it's... And the thing with the collabos is they're always trying... I feel like they were trying to put tech into a popular mainstream, like in terms of sound, and these beats kind of prove that on, Let Me In a way, Sorry and shit kind of feels like that, the Midwest Choppers beat kind of feels very popular, but it's still got that tech tinge. Like, tech can sound popular while staying himself, and I'll talk more about that when all 6s and 7s, but, he goes on these beats. The features kill it, probably some of the best features he's had up to this point in his career, except for all 6s and 7s, which again, I'll talk about when I get to that release. The lyrical content feels more spread out. He's not focusing on too much of one thing. He's still kind of devoting to his fan base on Red Nose, and he's still trying to spread his wings out on a majority of this release. My favorite track is probably Psychology 101, the title track, just because Chino goes on, Crooked Eye kills it, Tech kills it. But I love this release. It's got a good underlying theme of the 816 Boys that kind of shows up multiple times until you hear this song that keeps getting mentioned, Areola. I think it's great. Yeah. Let's move on, shall we? So the next album he released was called Kod, which was also released in 2009, and this is Tech's darkest release. The beats have a lot of strings on them, and not in the sense of the older releases where they kind of just feel unnatural. The strings on here really feel grandiose and try to invoke a lot of emotions, like on this track in the trunk, on Horns, kind of has that feel to it. This album is split up into 3 very different styles: Anger, Madness, and the Whole. Anger just being him pissed the fuck off. I mean, he starts off Show Me a God, where he's talking about giving up faith, and he continues that with just these aggressive, furious tracks on how he's just in this morbid mindset. And Madness is just being insane. Tracks like Pinocchio and In the Trunk being about, like, just taking a girl and making her a fan of Tech N9ne by driving her insane. Pinocchio being about wanting a woman to, like, be with you, like, to be in a committed relationship, and you end up killing them because you're, like, it's a weird story. There's a lot of great... It's one of the few tracks on here that really tells a really good story. The tracks on here aren't really typical to the Tech style. It's all just dark tracks. It's really the contrast to Everready. It's like the almost complete contrast. I mean, Kod, King of Darkness, is just this dark, low. He just sounds just so drained of emotion. He just sounds so void in a dark way. Definitely one of my favorites of Tech for a different reason. He used music as a therapy, as a way of getting through this dark period of his life, and I respect him for making this release. He's still going crazy on these beats, and he just sounds phenomenal. He still has some of these choruses that are really sing-along, like Black in the Sun, kind of on In the Trunk, definitely on Leave Me Alone. I mean, Leave Me Alone is a track title. I mean, it's very just dark hip-hop, and I respect him 1,000 times more after this release. He had the balls to really show his emotions on a record, and I love this album. Tells some great stories. Tech really gives it his all, and he follows it up with something that's kind of a balance to it, but yeah. Definitely love this record. My favorite track is probably Low. Low is just a dark, low point on the record, and I definitely love it. And the next thing he released was an EP called Lost Scripts of Kod, which was released last year, and this is kind of just a small extension of Kod. It's split up Anger, Madness, The Whole. It doesn't completely come out more on this. It feels less so like Like I Died doesn't really seem like an angry track. Last Sad Song kind of feels like a whole track, but I mean, it's kind of poorly meshed up. But the tracks on here are great. Double O Nina, he's just going on and on, telling a good story about kind of being this double agent in the mainstream. It's a weird track, but it's a great track. It's a good story. Tech does a great job on that one. Favorite track on here is Like I Died. Just the remix of it, just because I like the anger he is presenting, but it just doesn't feel angry, if that makes sense. Like the track is about what'll it be like when I'm gone, you know? And I mean, there's a great message behind it, and it's fueled well. I just don't feel there's a lot of anger on this track. It just feels more down in a different sense, but it's also kind of uplifting in another sense. Again, great tracks. It's a good extension of KOD. It's really all I have to say about it. It's an EP, 5 tracks. Definitely pick it up if you want a small dip of this sound technology I'm trying to emulate. Let's talk about his next album, shall we? And the next thing he released was another collabos album called The Gates Mixplate, which was also released back last year. And this album is almost a complete contrast to KOD. It's almost Ever Ready on steroids in terms of party beats, party vibes. 816 Boys Are Back, which is a track on Poo Wah Wah. I don't hate this album. I love this album for a different reason. I love that it's kind of tech making modernized his style party hip hop. I mean, OG still seems like a track he would do. Poo Wah Wah, even to an extent, kind of sounds like that. And he kind of addresses this change of style on the track Harvey Dent, which I love. I mean, I like when an artist adapts their sound for whatever reason they want to. And while some of the tracks on here aren't the best he's done, like Gamer and kind of like Jumpin' Jacks, it's still a great record. KCT, my favorite drink song he's done. My favorite party song he's done. It's just a great chill verse, big chorus song. I don't love the beats on this thing. The beats on this thing seem very just modernized popular hip-hop, which is one of the biggest reasons I have with a lot of popular hip-hop. The beats are too just along the same lines. It kind of seems like a modernized version of his early releases in terms of beats. And it just seems like a step forward in terms of the party vibe that Ever Ready was presenting at certain points. But the reason why he made this album is because he wanted to make an album as a follow-up to KOD that wasn't as dark or morbid. That's why all the tracks on here are like great, loud tracks, great party tracks. I actually recommend this release if you're used to popular hip-hop. If you're a tech fan, you might not like this release because a lot of the tracks on here are really, really, really party-heavy. Nothing really too impressive except for Harvey Dent. I love the track Harvey Dent. That's my favorite on here. I do love the mindset behind this record, especially coming off of KOD. It's just not my favorite release. Definitely not my least favorite collabos, but definitely not my favorite album of this part. And it's just a good follow-up to Tech following up KOD. Let's talk about another EP that I'm surprised is kind of released, shall we? And the next thing he released was an EP called Cephas, which was also released last year. He put out a lot of shit last year, guys. And the weird thing about this release is that it is split up like KOD, but it doesn't feel like that. Like, it doesn't feel like it should be split up like that. Some of the tracks on here have that vibe that Tech brings, the darker vibe of tracks like Alucard and on Bite Me. But, I mean, overall, it feels like a good bridge between the KOD killer sound to the all 6s and 7s sound. The beats kind of fall along those vibes. And, again, he still stomps. It's just a weird release to come off of Gates Mixplate for this to come out. It just seems kind of random. It was a nice thing. It was one of my favorite EPs of last year. But, I mean, the tracks on here have weird vibes to them. Really, the only ones I keep going back to are Asshole, Alucard, and Bite Me, and sometimes Trip and Come In. It's not terrible. It's out of his EPs, it's my favorite. The two that there are. Out of the releases from last year, it's probably my second favorite. My favorite was the mixtape, but I think that he showed more abrasiveness in the lyrics, especially on Asshole. He was more confident in his words, if that makes sense. I think that he is starting to get more confident as an MC in terms of boasting himself up. I mean, there's some of that in the early stuff, but I mean, he, especially on this end, on all 6s and 7s, he starts to boast himself up, which he deserves to, because he's a phenomenal MC that deserves any sort of positive feedback he gets. He doesn't really deserve a lot of negativity. He's a great MC who writes great lyrics on phenomenal beats. I mean, for him to release this much music and still have this many diverse style of beats is interesting to me. My favorite track on here is Alucard. Now let's talk about the last thing he released last year, shall we? And the next thing he released was a mixtape called Bad Season, which was also released last year. And I'm going to include a link to this in the other thing. And this is my favorite thing that he released last year. It feels almost like a reward for all of the work he's put up. I mean, he has some famous producers on here, like Dre. Dre worked on this thing. And while some of the songs, like All Day All Night, feel extremely on the pop side, like on the popular rap side, they still feel tech-ish. And that could just be because, even though this feels very mainstreamish at points, it's still just tech and his Strange Music label mates. And Irv Phenom. And, I mean, the tracks on here are kind of weird. They don't feel completely like Tech-9ne, except for when tech goes on them. Like, the first actual track, Table and Chest Stress, is just tech on an organic beat, and it feels so raw for him, and it's awesome. It almost feels like a collabos album, even though it's not. It's my favorite release of last year because it's another great bridge, like Seepage, from the style of KOD and his kind of mid-career stuff, or at least his mid-career so far stuff, to the all 6s and 7 style, in terms of beats, especially on like Something to See, and I believe it's Live Like I'm Dying, and No More Music for the Suckers definitely has this feel that I feel tech is going to go towards, in terms of style, the way the beat's done, the way he goes on the beat, and I love this mixtape. Chris sounds great on this, and this is great exposure for Chris Calico, because out of all the Strange Music label members, it's Tech and then Chris. I love Chris's stuff. Brotherland Chong I don't completely consider part of Strange Music because he's been around for so long. Overall, it'd be Tech, Brotherland Chong, but Chris, out of the people who've been on the label, Chris is my second favorite. And this definitely is a great exposure for him. He sounds great on the choruses, especially on All Day All Night. He really sounds like a great hype man on that track, and I love the style of this album, this kind of mixed bag that goes together. I think it's great. If you love tech, definitely check this out. Even if you don't love tech, it's just a great hip-hop record. Love this album. Phenomenal. Let's get to this year, shall we? We got 2 more albums to talk about. Whew! And the next album he released was released this year. It was called All 6s and 7s. And if you saw my top 11 albums of the year video, this was on there. Definitely one of my favorite hip-hop releases of the year. This is Tech's really first shot at the mainstream. He's gotten a lot of notoriety up until those albums release. He has so many popular features on here, like popular artist features like Lil Wayne, B.O.B., who's still an up-and-comer, T-Pain, Busta, Twista. He has up-and-comers like B.O.B., Hobson, Yellow Wolf, even though Yellow Wolf's been in the game for a while, and Kendrick Lamar. I mean, he's really providing a mixed bag for the mainstream to feel what Tech-9ne is coming out with. He has some great choruses, like on He's a Metal Giant, and even on Worldwide Choppers to an extent. I Love Music is the same way. He has this variety of stuff, the dark stuff with like Cult Leader and The Boogeyman. He has the sex-driven songs like Fuck Food and Overtime and Pornographic. He kind of has a look for the future in Strangeland. He has the self-reflective tracks in Mama Nem and stuff like that, and he's really kind of almost overdoing it in a sense. I think it's amazing, but I mean, I think some might think he's like overdoing it because there's so many tracks on this album. It could easily be split into 2 parts, and there's so many skits on this thing that it's a good way to help split up the sections of the album because it's kind of organized in a disorganized fashion. Like it starts off with these kind of a variety of tracks, of stuff he's done in the past, like Am I a Psycho and Worldwide Choppers. It fades into the darkest tracks, like Boogeyman and Cult Leader has the Spectrum tracks, and then it has the self-reflective stuff. All the features on here, for the most part, are great. There's a couple of dips, like Snoop's verse, but I mean, this album is phenomenal. Chris does great on the choruses. Just a phenomenal piece of work. I love this record. Everything about it is great. Tech should really shine with this release. This release was everything I could have expected for coming off the heels of last year. He came out swinging strong. I was impressed with some of these features. Wayne, kind of not great. T-Pain was pretty damn good. Some of my favorite tracks of the year on this release. Oh my god, it's amazing. This is the last album I would really suggest people check out if they want to get into Tech N9ne. If I were to hand them like 5 albums, it'd be this, Absolute Power, Killer, Ever Ready, and maybe Bad Season. Maybe Angelic or Bad Season, depending on who I'm talking to. I think that he really gave it his all on this release, and he really did a great job, and I think that it deserves to be much more popular than it even is now. And if you have not picked up the release, definitely get it. Best thing he's done this year, even though the next release seems more geared towards his fans. We'll talk about that in a second. My favorite track, Worldwide Choppers. Oh my god, all those MCs playing off each other so well. I talked about this in the songs list a little bit. They just all stomp, bust the stomps, twist the stomps. Yellow Wolf does amazingly. Just the whole thing is amazing. Yeah. Now the next thing he released, the last thing he's released so far in his career is an LP called Welcome to Strangeland. It's another Collabos LP, but this feels the least like a Collabos LP than the rest. Even though there's a lot of features on this thing. Mayday does some of the beats on here, and they're on the tracks. You have the 816 boys returning again. You have his whole Strange Music crew coming in on this. And I feel this is more for the fans than All 60s and 7s was. Like, All 60s and 7s was said it was geared towards the fans, and you got that vibe on some tracks like Technicians, but, I mean, the overall vibe of this album just feels more tech, if that makes sense. Like, All 60s and 7s has its tech vibes, but I mean, like, from start to finish, this thing really kind of feels more like a tech album, in terms of beats, in terms of his flow, even at some points, like Beautiful Music, and my favorite, you really get more tech. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing it. I'm not criticizing All 60s and 7s because it's a phenomenal piece of work. Welcome to Strangeland just feels more like, if you liked All 60s and 7s, here's more tech, you know? I think that this album has, again, just phenomenal lyrics, like on The Noose, which has this happy beat, but it's kind of this morbid track, both about the visiting troops Tech talks about, and there's like just these dark lyrics from the members of Mayday, who this introduced me to Mayday, and I definitely want to check out more of the stuff. Phenomenal work from those guys. I can't wait to hear the Clusterfuck EP that they're producing, or they're helping produce. One of the most interesting tracks on here is Who Do I Catch, because I feel Tech is reflecting on his future. You know, he's talking about, where am I going to go from here? Where am I going to go from coming up, working 10-plus years, putting out music almost constantly, and trying to get into the mainstream? Now that I'm here, what am I going to do? Some of the beats on here feel really dark and natural for him. I love this release. It's definitely not bad. If it would have come out earlier, and I had more time to analyze it, I'd have maybe put it on my list, but I mean, for now, it just kind of feels like motivational, dark, and beautiful, if that makes sense. Like, some of these beats are so beautifully composed, and they're so cryptic yet dark and unique. Like, my favorite, the beat on that is so weird. I love this album. I love the start. Stars is a great track. Stars almost feels like it's a strong opener that almost feels like this space dream of a track. Like, I feel like we're getting into Tech's mind post All 60s and 7s. Like, it almost feels like a callback. It almost feels like a call out to the world into his mind even more so. And I love this album. It's just another great Tech-9 album. I mean, I can't really... He's never really put out an album that I hate. He's just put out albums that I'm not a huge fan of. This album is phenomenal. Features on it, great. Again, Chris sounds great on the choruses. That's pretty much it, folks. That is Tech-9 reviewed. I think Tech is a phenomenal artist who deserves to be more popular than he is. And he's one of my biggest inspirations as an MC myself. I think that he is more personal than a lot of other MCs out there, and I respect him for that. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, folks. My favorite off of Welcome to Strangeland is probably my favorite, either my favorite or Stars. Hopefully you guys enjoy this again. You guys have good days, life situations. I'll see you another day.